In recent years, one of the best coaching jobs was done by Kevin Stefanski of the Cleveland Browns. In 2023, in that division, he won 11 games, and his quarterbacks were old, creaky Joe Flacco, odd Deshaun Watson, P.J. Walker, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Kevin Stefanski's a hell of a coach. Went to Penn. He knows more than you do about offense. I know, hard to believe he does, and he knows more than me. He has announced that Joe Flacco will start against the Rams, 25 to 30 plays for the starters. Dillon Gabriel is the backup. Shedeur Sanders is third. I know you've got your Shedeur/Barry Sanders jersey you're wearing. I know. And I've said before, I think Shedeur was underdrafted. I think he was. But speeding tickets, silliness, Dillon Gabriel's a much more kind of centered, serious kid, and Shedeur is third. I got to trust Stefanski. Guy won 11 games with like musical chairs at quarterback in 2023 in the AFC, in a division with the Ravens. Joe Burrow, he won 11 games. He knows more than I do. I know. You are absolutely sure you could be president. You would do a better job. It's the world we live in. Everybody's an expert. Everybody's an epidemiologist during a pandemic. Kevin Stefanski's a smart guy. He's one of the 2 Ivy League coaches in the league. He's a pretty smart guy. He won 11 games with that nonsense in 2023. He's got Dillon Gabriel 2 and Shedeur 3. Greg Cosell was on 25 minutes ago, and I asked him, what do you see? You've seen both of them play in the preseason. What do you see?
Offensive coaches, they think about how does a player work within my scheme. And what Gabriel is he's essentially stylistically similar to a Tua Tagovailoa. Sanders is a little different player. He's not quite as rhythmic. And he has a tendency, and this showed up on tape, by the way, even though the good outweighed the bad when he played 2 weeks ago, he tends to drift a little in the pocket. He tends to retreat in the pocket. You know, how many quarterbacks are the Browns going to keep? No team keeps 4 quarterbacks. So it's going to be interesting going down the stretch here. And then Sanders got hurt and missed some time in practice, and that's not going to help him.
So let's be honest. The entire NFL told you he's a 5th-round pick, and the Browns are telling you he's a 3rd-string quarterback. He was overvalued. I'm guilty as charged. I thought, oh, I can see him fall into the 2nd round. Guess I'm wrong. But the league told you. And by the way, 7 teams annually are desperate for quarterback. And another 15 are desperate for a backup. The whole league passed for 4 rounds. And many of us believe Jimmy Haslam, the owner of the Browns, is the one that nudged the front office into drafting him. So the Browns drafted Dillon Gabriel 2 rounds before. So you can run to your Reddit board and dogpound.com and say it's a conspiracy, but the whole league told you he's a 5th-round quarterback. And the Browns are telling you, Kevin Stefanski, who won 11 games in 2023 with nonsense in a division with the Ravens, in the AFC. He's a 3rd-string quarterback. I think I'm pretty good on the quarterback thing. Now that Sam Darnold can play, I haven't missed a ton on quarterbacks. I thought Shedeur, I don't know. I watched Jackson Dart with better teammates. I watched Shedeur with a bad college O-line and no run game be really productive against much better rosters. Much, much better rosters. But the league and the Browns, they're telling you, I mean, I know this is hard for guys, but sometimes you have to admit there are people that are behind the rope. They have access. They see stuff. I mean, it sounded like to me, remember, Greg Cosell said a couple of weeks ago on the show, he said Shedeur is accurate, but he's not as accurate as the analysts are saying. The film tells you he's not that accurate. He's accurate. But, and for the record, the Browns have everything to gain on Shedeur playing. If Shedeur could be the starter, are you kidding me? That would be unbelievable as a fifth-round pick. Look what it's done to the Niners. You can stack your roster. You can get out from under that horrible Deshaun Watson contract. They would love for Shedeur as a fifth-round pick to be a starting quarterback. There's no advantage to the Browns bearing him. And I said, I looked at Dillon Gabriel in college, and my take was he had great coaching and talent at Oregon. He's just too small. He's going to struggle kind of seeing the field, and he's acknowledged he can. I just thought, I mean, he looks smaller. And I'd seen photos of him next to other, athletes at Oregon, and I thought, I just don't see that as an NFL quarterback. I've always said size matters unless you're like Kyler Murray or Russell Wilson in your prime and you can run around and you're so elusive. That's not Dillon Gabriel. Shedeur's a legit 6'2". Shedeur moves well enough, and he was really accurate with no talent around him at Colorado. But Stefanski knows more than I do, and I trust him, and there's no value in bearing him. I would love to be on dogpoundbarks.com today. I bet you that website is lit. I bet they're going crazy in everybody stinks but us in Cleveland.com. I would love to be on that. I don't have my phone with me. Dogs by Nature. Is that the big one? Woo-hoo! That site is roaring today. John, what do you make of it?
Didn't Stefanski tell you what he thought about Shedeur when he had the chance to take him in the third round and he took another quarterback? And even if you say, well, the GMs pick the players, no one picks a quarterback for an offensive head coach. That's the offensive head coach, even if he's not the boss in the draft room. Quarterbacks are his baby. He chose Dillon Gabriel in the third round. Now, we can disagree, and I do. I thought that was a little crazy. But he clearly likes Dillon Gabriel. I mean, that's not debatable. And Dillon Gabriel has what? 2, 3, 4, 5 years worth of college experience that they're basing this off of.
Let's check out wolfwolf.com and see what they're saying. Man, this is good. Dogbiscuit.com. Let's go check it out right now. Hour 3 next. He likes Shedeur Sanders, too. We are live. We're in Chicago. It's The Herd, wherever you may be and however you may be listening. Thanks for making us part of your day. It's an interesting thing that I've noticed this over the course of my life is that, and I watch a lot of clips, John, business clips. Jeff Bezos constantly gives fascinating advice. I often share those with my management at my company, The Volume. I'm sharing clips. And one of the things I have noticed over the course of my life, it can be Larry Ellison, the guys running Netflix, you're much better off just admitting you're wrong and moving on. In fact, when I started my company, I reached out to Mark Cuban. I reached out to another very, very successful business guy that owned a stake in Barstool. And I said, could you just give me one piece of advice? And Cuban and the other gentleman gave me the same piece of advice separately, which was, don't fall in love with your idea. If you're right on something, double down. If you're wrong, own it and move off it. Stop trying to convince yourself, my ideas are perfect. Jeff Bezos says this all the time. You should make changes every day to your company. Don't stop worrying about being right. Get it right. And I am clearly wrong on Shedeur Sanders. The Cleveland Browns today, Kevin Stefanski, Shedeur fell to the 5th round, and Shedeur was named as the number 3 quarterback. And I'm wrong on him. I thought he was, I looked at Dillon Gabriel, and I thought Shedeur was bigger. I think that matters. I thought he moved better. I think that matters in 2025. And I thought he was more accurate when he was flushed out of the pocket, which in the NFL, you're always flushed out of the pocket. And so I thought he was a better NFL, and he was very, very productive. Was Dillon Gabriel with great teammates. Shedeur was productive with a terrible O-line and the worst running game in college football. So I looked at the two, and I'm like, Dillon Gabriel I said it before the draft. I felt Dillon Gabriel was a 4th or a 5th round pick, and Shedeur at worst was a mid-second, late 2nd round pick. I'm wrong. Every NFL GM disagreed with me, and Kevin Stefanski, who won 11 games in 2023 with musical chairs at quarterbacks. And by the way, Shedeur and Dillon Gabriel were both productive. But the thing that impressed me is Shedeur had a higher completion percentage, had just as good a TD interception ratio, and averaged more passing yards per game at Colorado than Dillon Gabriel did at Oregon, and Oregon stacked with NFL talent. So my take, now obviously, you know, let's be honest about it, Dillon Gabriel's going to win more games, but they always say winning's not a quarterback stat. But in terms of completion percentage, TD interception, passing yards a game, Shedeur was better than Dillon, and not even close the level of roster composition at Colorado than Oregon. That is chess and checkers. So I thought he was better. Listen, the Eagles, the Philadelphia Eagles, and this is why Howie Roseman, to me, is as good as any GM we've ever had in the NFL, signed Carson Wentz to a huge contract. Wasn't long after it, they moved on. Sean McVay loved Jared Goff. Then he didn't. Guys, more than women, struggle admitting, yeah, I missed on that. I don't. Every Monday, calling right, calling wrong. I think my wife always says, you're either right or you're learning. You're right, or you're like, oh, you got to learn in your mistakes. So, I mean, Microsoft's a great company. They missed on the iPhone. They missed on the phone. Completely missed. Steve Ballmer's brilliant. Richest NBA owner. Missed on the phone. Nobody's perfect, except anonymous trolls on the internet. It's amazing how that works. They're brilliant. They're never wrong. So, listen, the NFL's telling you Dillon's better. Draft's telling you. And the depth chart. You know, I looked at numbers with much less protection, run support, and I would say Dan Lanning, in my opinion, is a better coach than Deion Sanders. And his staff is excellent. Shedeur put up better numbers. So I was like, I don't know. He's taller. He moves better. He's accurate. What can I say? You know, I was eventually right on Sam Darnold, but I think I overvalued Shedeur Sanders. And maybe I'm wrong on Caleb Williams, but a lot of people agree with me on that. I called my people in the NFL on Shedeur, and most of them were like, yeah, it's a bad quarterback class. All of them said this. Cam Ward's the best quarterback in the class. All of them said that. Nobody said that. My guys were very hit and miss on Jackson Dart. One, a buddy of mine loved Jackson Dart. We're no longer friends. No. One person loved him. Other mixed. Shedeur was he ain't great, but he's probably a late first. Everybody needs quarterbacks. But I think now in hindsight, people were talking themselves into it because the quarterback position's so important. Everybody reaches on quarterback. But here's Greg Cosell earlier in our show on Shedeur Sanders, who was just named the backup to the backup in Cleveland.
The term that's used a lot in the NFL is scheme adaptability, Colin. Coaches think on both sides of the ball in terms of how does a guy fit into my scheme? Can he run my scheme? You know this. Coaches work 16 hours a day, and they're putting in their scheme, their game plan. It starts with OTAs. They want all this executed, and when it's not executed, then it becomes a problem.
Yeah, and Shedeur doesn't probably execute as well as Dillon Gabriel. I mean, Shedeur won 9 games last year, completed 74% of his throws, 37 TDs, 10 picks, 318 yards passing a game, with a very, very meager offense outside of Travis Hunter. And Travis was returning kicks and cornerback. He was doing everything. So there you go. The NFL has spoken. I'm sure this is being received with nuance and contextualization in Ohio. They're probably going crazy. It was like the Tim Tebow stuff. Like, Denver would have loved, they took him in the first round. They wanted Tebow to be great. Well, he won a playoff game. A lot of people do. A lot of people win one playoff game. Denver got Tim Tebow, didn't have to pay him forever, right? You would want the Tim Tebow thing to work. John Elway's like, nah, that's not going to work. Let's get Peyton Manning. So, it's just, John, I think I'm admitting now the league has spoken. Stefanski's spoken. I overvalued Shedeur Sanders.
The league has spoken. It's been 3 weeks in training camp. I mean, we got time. His career. I mean, Sam Darnold, you never know. Here's the thing. unlike most industries where people are very unemotional because you're dealing with widgets, you're dealing with buildings, you're dealing with things that are not human beings, people will pivot fast. In football and in pro sports in general, when you're my guy, and Dillon Gabriel was clearly Stefanski's guy, they drafted him in the 3rd round. Like that's a pretty high pick. It's kind of in that weird zone. Not quite the starting quarterback, but someone I like more than to risk it to get to the 3rd day of the draft. So Dillon Gabriel, if they're both healthy, there was nothing Shedeur Sanders was going to be able to do through a couple weeks. And I understand that, the Twitter, social media thinks that Shedeur Sanders is Tom Brady because of a preseason game against plumbers and firemen. But the reality is that gets overvalued with normal people, not in terms of the NFL circles and coaches. And at the end of the day, Dillon Gabriel was always going to be ahead of them if they were both healthy, at least going into the start of the season.
Yeah.
And the reality, too, is they're all going to play this year. They're all going to play this year. And the regular season games matter infinitely more than anything that happens in August.
And again, it's what coaches like. Coaches like consistency of personality, of performance, of accuracy. And I could see Stefanski as a really smart guy saying, Dillon runs the play. He's consistently accurate. He stays in the pocket. He gets rid of the ball more quickly, more often. Coaches love consistency. Coaches like high floor, low ceiling. If they're given an option without a star, it's like, and you look at that room right now, quarterback room, there's no stars there. So I can see him just saying Flacco and Dillon Gabriel. Maybe there's moments where Shedeur is a little bit more fascinating, but consistency is really appealing to offensive coaches.
Can we also acknowledge that Shedeur Sanders, the way he plays, Stefanski runs a version of the Shanahan offense, timing-based. Deshaun Watson, who was an ad-lib playmaker, even before he fell off a cliff athletically and as a talent, never fit the scheme. Remember, they tried to adapt, and it just did not work. Shedeur Sanders actually is much more tailored for a guy like an Andy Reid, a Sean McVay, that is a little more open to run around and making plays.
Yeah.
You get with Kyle Shanahan, you get with LaFleur, Stefanski, it's very, very, 1-2, we're seeing with Ben Johnson, what he's asking Caleb to do. You can ad-lib once or twice throughout the game, but the majority of these play calls when it comes to passes, do what I tell you to do. And that Shedeur's strength is kind of just making plays. And that's what he did in the preseason game. So everyone freaked out that he's John Elway or something 2.0. It's like, guys, that's not really what Stefanski is looking for.
Sure.
In the way he's judging his. So when I watch Dillon Gabriel, everyone's like, oh, he threw a pick 6. I watch that. I'm like, I think he's doing a lot of the stuff that Stefanski's going to like.
Yeah, I remember talking to Chip Kelly about Geno Smith briefly, and he's like, oh, I like Geno. Geno runs the play. If you can give him a run game. If you look at Geno Smith on play action, he's really good. Like Geno Smith with a run game, Sam Darnold with a run game are really effective. They get reckless when they're pressured. But when he went to the Raiders, he likes Geno Smith because his offense and what he wants you to do, Geno can move just enough for Chip Kelly. It works in his system. He likes him as a fit.
I do think these guys, and I don't think they're coaching and GMing for their job. They just got extensions. But, Cleveland's a weird place. The owner has been, quick to change his mind. This story, if these quarterbacks are awful, Flacco gets injured, Kenny Pickett comes in, doesn't look good, Dillon Gabriel looks overmatched, it's going to get louder and louder, and people are going to want to see Shedeur, like you said, at dogpound.com/roofroof. They're going to want to see the guy. So it's hard to slow that down, right? Everyone was on their side with Deshaun Watson. We can all see it. This one, the almost anticipation of his hope, not seeing him play, can create a craziness. We've seen it before with these. Sometimes the best player in your team is the backup quarterback. Then he gets in, and you're like, what were we talking about? Yeah.
So there's a difference between something crazy happening and a mistake. A lot of people struggle during COVID. A lot of businesses struggle during COVID. Nobody can predict a pandemic, right? It's some stuff just businesses could not survive. A lot of great restaurants just could not survive. Doesn't mean they're bad restaurants. So Vegas does not make a lot of mistakes. Last year, when Minnesota reeled off 14 wins, that wasn't a mistake by Vegas. That was an outlier. Nobody thought Sam Darnold would be the best quarterback in the league for 14 weeks. Nobody saw that coming, including Kevin O'Connell. That's not a mistake by Vegas. They made just 2 mistakes last year on future bets. They had Washington at 6.5. And I went on the air. I said, folks, Jaden Daniels is going to look a lot like Lamar Jackson. He's got a lot of college starts. He's electric. And they flushed out all those toxic people in the organization, specifically Dan Snyder. And they bring in really, really smart people. They're going to do better. They're going to do, I didn't think they'd go 12-5, but I'm like, they're going to get to 7, 8, 9 wins on Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin. They're going to win. That was a mistake by Vegas. Then they had the Broncos at 5.5 wins. And I said, you got to be kidding me. Sean Payton alone's getting you to 6. Bo Nix has 61 college starts. They've got a top 10, 12 roster. I don't know how many games they're going to win. I don't know. I'm not sure if they're a playoff team, but they're going to be a 7, 8, 9, 10 win. They're not a 5-win team. So those were mistakes. Vegas doesn't make a lot of it. Minnesota's not a mistake. It's just, good hell was Sam Darnold on fire for the first 14 weeks. Nobody knew that. I went through all the future bets today. The AFC, I think they're right on the money with everybody. I don't think they made a mistake in the AFC. There's a couple of teams in the NFC, and by the way, it's not the Bears. The Bears are at 8.5. That's exactly where they should be. I think optimistically they win 9. A little less optimistically, 8 wins feels about right. They struggle in division. Chicago is, 12 years, I think once or twice they've had like a above 500 or 500 record against their division. They don't beat Green Bay, and they're not as good right now as Detroit. And if J.J. McCarthy can play, they could get swept by Minnesota. So that's a good number for Chicago's 8-9 win team. That's what they are. But here's one that I think is a glaring mistake. Seattle at 8.5. So Seattle went 10-7 last year with a rookie head coach figuring out how to be a head coach and creating a culture on the fly. Geno Smith was the quarterback, and the offensive line was putrid. 31st, according to PFF. Well, they've certainly helped solve the offensive line drafting Gray Zabel, who is grabbing and picking up players like Chris Jones in the preseason. He's been unbelievable. And Sam Darnold, to me, is an upgrade. The other thing to think about was Seattle. They got the AFC and the NFC South, the 2 weakest divisions. So they play New Orleans and Tampa and the Colts at home. Jacksonville, they play Houston at home. I mean, Tennessee, at Tennessee, they got a much better roster than Tennessee. So would you be shocked if they got 6 out of 8 games against the AFC and NFC South? Would you be shocked if they won 6? Hosting New Orleans, hosting Tampa, hosting Houston, hosting the Colts, and at Carolina and at Jacksonville are not big home field advantages. So I think they could win 6 games just against the AFC and NFC South. Also, San Francisco is falling apart, and Seattle gets to open at home against San Francisco. Their wide receiving core is falling apart. And by the way, they play the Rams in week 11 and week 16. Will Matt Stafford be standing upright? We know Matt's going to be ready for the opener. Is he going to be available? So to me, take the over at 8.5. It just, year 2 of a head coach, they got the culture built. I think Sam Darnold an upgrade, maybe slight over Geno. Offensive line can't be as bad as it was last year. And their schedule, AFC, NFC South, heavy favorites in some of those games like New Orleans at home. And they're healthier at running back than last year. So, people say, oh, they lost DK Metcalf. There's a reason they moved DK Metcalf. He was viewed as a little bit of a distraction. Now, there's one other team. Now, I wouldn't make a big bet, but I do think Green Bay at 9.5 is undervaluing the Packers. Again, they won double digits last year, and I'll argue that Jordan Love was not healthy the entire year.